That sounds like far, far, far too much. At that point, I'd rather just quite literally like take a piece of paper and tape it to my like computer screen and just be like, all right, I'm gonna read off this, and then we'll just flip pages as we go, because that is already like 5 devices that don't need to be used to use a freaking teleprompter.
I concur. I 100% concur. So. All right. Well, I guess. Welcome to this random interesting episode where we get to talk with none other than Alex from Ashen Wings TCG. I've seen a lot of his content on the YouTube sphere, and you know it's actually pretty interesting because the content creator sphere with the YouTube world, it seems pretty small, but there's a lot of content creators out there that I haven't actually got to interact with, and this really will be, I guess, our first foray into interacting in an official capacity here. So welcome very, very to the show. So
thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's honestly super great to kind of start collabing with more and more people. Also being kind of a one-man band myself, I end up doing a lot of it, and then I end up never reaching out. But it turns out that people all over are just totally fine hanging out with everybody. So it's about making friends and making new connections, and I'm always happy to talk about card games. So.
Absolutely. And for those of you that may not know, I'm Jacob, Geeks First. That's where this video will be posted, and that's pretty much all you'll need to know about me. I like Flesh and Blood. I like card games. I am surrounded by a bunch of cardboard, and you know that's one of the kind of topics that I'd love to ask Alex here. Alex, what is your elevator pitch for Flesh and Blood? Because I like hearing this from people all the time when I talk to them about Flesh and Blood, because everyone has an elevator pitch for every game that they love. So what's your elevator pitch for Flesh and Blood?
I think honestly an elevator pitch would be more like explaining the fact that Flesh and Blood and its community is something that I truly did not get to experience in many other TCGs, in which everybody is really, really just nice and awesome. My very first experiences with Flesh and Blood have been unlike any other TCG, in which I go to an armory, I play, and then even if I don't have a good deck, I was surrounded by a bunch of people who sat there and told me this is how these interactions work, and they were super helpful. They'd let me borrow cards if I was curious on how things worked. The company behind the game itself is even super amazing and really ends up just caring so much about their player base and their developers, and they're putting their real heart and soul into something like this. And I get behind that a lot, honestly. The fact that the company truly cares is more than anything for me, and I'm very happy to be a part of the content creator space for the game.
And it seems to be an ever-changing ecosystem as far as the people that are and are not making content. I mean, obviously, with the game going on 5 years now, it doesn't seem like that. It's crazy to me. There are some content creators that have left, and some content creators that have joined in, and some that I guess would be synonymous with names that are in the community: DM Armada, Red Zone Rogue, Sloop Dupe. There's a bunch of podcasts. Actually, that was a funny I started making a video, by the way, on all of the podcasts, and I literally stopped because I was like, okay, I'm up to like 95 podcasts. I'm like, this video cannot be 6 hours long, and I can't just be like, every podcast is good, because I tried literally for about 6 months, tried listening to every podcast I could all week, and it was nothing. I mean, it was grueling. I was up to like 1 in the morning most of the time, and I'm like, I cannot keep up with the ingestion of all of this content. So I feel bad for not listening to all of them, but I've had to kind of back off on some of that because there's just so much content to consume. There really is.
Yeah.
Which, kind of gets into the formats, right? There's a lot of different formats in Flesh and Blood, and I guess this is just more of an open question, but there's a lot of talk, a lot of banter back and forth. I know that there's the pillars of the community that really like, Commoner and Blitz. And then there's others that really live in the CC sphere, and then obviously we don't really have, Clash is another one. I guess PvE is coming at some point. Of all of these different, I guess for lack of a better word, formats that exist, and for Strike now being the thing that just kind of came out, that's going to be a big fun bulk of some conversation I'd love to have today. With that hot off the presses, where do you see these formats for folks, one, joining in the game, and just maybe in general? I know you're a big advocate for some of these formats, so you want to talk about any of those in general and kind of go from there?
Yeah, I mean, as the game continues to grow, I mean, obviously, Flesh and Blood and LSS, they have a very big focus on the competitive version of their game. I mean, they've made it known it is the most competitive TCG in the market right now, and everybody is aware of it. And the competitive scene is really, really awesome, right? If you're a big person into competitive TCGs, Flesh and Blood's definitely one to check out. No, honestly, no matter what format you check out, but I am more of an advocate for budget formats, beginner formats, kind of getting people into the game because that is, at least was, quite a hard thing to do at a LGS level. Most LGSs are usually, at least here in the States, are doing classic constructed armories, which is the most competitive version of Flesh and Blood in that format. And it was very hard to get into for a little while. Obviously, creators were making budget decks that you can build for $25, $30 to go to your armory and play. But at the end of the day, you needed to buy hundreds and hundreds of dollars of cards in order to really compete with the people who were just going to your locals. And while that's fine, there's also a place for casual players who are just looking to play. And that's where things like Commoner, which is kind of like Pauper from Magic the Gathering, comes into play. It's very much so for, uh, you know, very budget play. Most decks are about $10 a piece, and you get to just play around, check out how the general functions of the game work, and move on from there. And then Clash, which is a unofficial format of Flesh and Blood that I'm part of the committee of, we kind of bump the power level up a little bit, and we allow for players to play the rares as well as the commons, and then add in a couple of thematic majestics and legendaries and stuff in there, so that way people can kind of learn the actual play style of their hero before kind of diving deep into Blitz or UPF or even Classic Constructed. So I like getting those entryway products into the hands of people who are genuinely curious, but getting them to play at LGSs is certainly a little more difficult, but the community seems to always come together and work in the best way. Everybody is an advocate for making Flesh and Blood as popular as it is, no matter who you are, and I think that's really, really awesome.
You know, that's interesting. You mentioned the LGS aspect, right? Obviously, one of the kind of core tenets that I know about Flesh and Blood, and for most people who have been in the community, is they want to say in the Flesh and Blood. They want everyone to have that person to person interaction. And there's a lot of games that are kind of coming out recently. Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously exist for a while, but you got Star Wars and Lorcana. And I've noticed that in general, Sorcery is another one. Altered TCG's coming. There's a billion games that were from the Kickstarter era that are kind of out there. Sometimes people's attention gets driven away from Flesh and Blood, but I've actually noticed that for the most part, people are coming back. And that's kind of where, in an interesting way, I've kind of wanted to make a video series at some point, maybe talking about the likenesses from Magic the Gathering or another ecosystem, and saying how is Flesh and Blood the same, better, or different. Which you don't have to necessarily be all the same, but right. But when you look at the card, right, when we're familiar with, there's a pitch, there's a cost, there's an attack, there's a defense. It's one card can do multiple things. It's not like in Magic where it's just a land, or in Pokemon it's just an energy, and that has a singular purpose. The complexity of even the permutations, maybe, if you use the right word, if I'm thinking of the right word, like in a IRA starter deck, if you had 4 cards in your starting hand, you could have I don't know, 4 times whatever the permutation of the 3 cards, or however you can pitch to play, right? You can have 6 or 7 different options, and then when you start adding weapons and equipment and interactions with board state, I mean, there's plenty of just permutations that exist. So it may seem overwhelming to some people to begin with, but I don't think it really is. And looking at these different games, are there any kind of striking similarities that you see between maybe like a Magic, a Pokemon, a Yu-Gi-Oh, a Lorcana, a Star Wars, anything like that could maybe bridge a gap for somebody that's like kind of on the edge and looking at being curious about these games?
I mean, as far as it being, Flesh and Blood is just kind of its own unique thing. I mean, there are some situations in which there's always going to be some kind of comparison. For instance, New is a new hero that just came out in the most recent set, and she kind of plays like in a very interesting, more mechanically specific way, plays like Demir Mill from Magic, right? And so you can make those connections to other TCGs, and if that helps you kind of bridge that gap, that's always good. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that does really make a TCG something that is unique is quite literally that it's got to be different, but also still very understandable. I mean, you look at something that really drew me to Flesh and Blood was actually the fact that every card can do anything, right? I mean, you can block with it, you can attack with it, you can pitch it, you can you can do nearly anything in regards to the resources you have in your hand, where some people like a more, I get a land, I play a land, I pass my turn. Next turn, I play a creature, play a land, pass turn. And if that's, everybody's got their own different play style. I just feel like Flesh and Blood is definitely a lot more interactive. And that is something that I enjoy, keeps me thinking over and over. And the resource system is really kind of its big deal. I mean,
it's unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you look at TCGs like Grand Archive, right? Grand Archive's got a very unique resource system as well, with putting cards from your hand into memory to play for things, and then you have to banish them to use things from material decks. I mean, they have to be unique in order to stand out, because there have been, during the Kickstarter age, so many TCGs are trying to play Magic the Gathering. They're trying to be Magic or be Pokemon or be Yu-Gi-Oh! And they end up failing because there's, outside of maybe a different art style direction, there's no difference between playing these different games. Whereas with Flesh and Blood, I feel it is unique in its own way, and people who have played TCGs for a long time can make their own connections from maybe their favorite past TCGs to this to help bridge that gap, which I think is nice. But at the end of the day, it is very, very different compared to other things.
I mean, like, I kind of grew up on the overly complicated stuff, like the Star Trek CCG or the Star Wars CCG by Decipher, the word salad on a card plus rule book that is yay thick and 6-point font that you had to have memorization. I mean, I think, honestly, that's one of the reasons that, like, I enjoy so many of the TCGs today, is because the mindset is just very different. You don't have to have a degree in, metaphysics to be able to understand why the game. I mean, there was literally a card in old Star Wars called Brainiac, and I know it was kind of a joke, but it literally had like mathematical computations on it. It's like, destiny was pi, so you had to know the coefficient of like 3.1415. You had to know all these things to be able to play it. It was a cute little like nod to what it was, but sometimes simplicity is great. And really, this is going to be, I think, the meat and potatoes of where I'd like to bring our conversation is. I know that there's Commoner, there's Clash, there's UPF. Technically, those all live in the same ecosystem as far as deck size, deck composition. Technically, Blitz, right, is in that same formula. Young heroes with the weapons, and if you look at the rarity system and you don't go full tuned like balls out Blitz where you're having Command and Conquerors and crazy stuff in there. You just go for kind of the mid tier, let's have fun. These first strike decks that, they're coming out. One, obviously Flesh and Blood being at Gen Con's a huge deal. Gen Con's a 70,000 plus event. It's here in Indianapolis, Indiana. That's where I'm from. And I'm just happy to see that they're going to be here. Ooh, sorry. Still getting over my cold. But it's intriguing that, last year and the year before, I was like, man, why aren't they at Gen Con? Why aren't they at these? And they finally started getting into these. I think they were at like Spiel or something. They went to a couple different overseas events. Maybe it wasn't Spiel. I know there was something over in the EU.
The UK Games
UK,
right?
Yep, they went to that. And with Gen Con, they're obviously pushing pretty hard. They got all these events that are happening. They got the Blaze promo, stuff like that. How do you think that people are going to perceive Flesh and Blood? Because in years past, I can say from personal experience, I walked up to vendors with Flesh and Blood cards, like high-end stuff, like Command and Conquers and stuff. Not that I actually really wanted to sell, but I would say, hey, this is a legendary from the set. This is not a legendary. I'm just picking a card as an example. I want to sell you my Stormstriders. It's $110. Are you going to be even interested in buying it? And most of these places literally said, no, I'm sorry, we're not even buying we're not buying and selling Flesh and Blood. So because they're such a big proponent this year and being at Gen Con, I will be really curious if that tune has changed from these larger vendors that are not the min-maxes, not the Fluken boxes, not the people that we know in the ecosystem that deal in it, right? But like the Star Cities and the, what's the damn, not Tiger Direct, that's a computer company. Oh my gosh.
You've got
Channel Fireball. That was one of the ones. You know,
yeah.
or whoever they are now. I don't know. There's plenty of places that we're buying. Troll and Toad. You know, those big name companies that typically you see that are buying Dave and Adam's Card World, right? Those places that specialize in, like, I'll buy graded Pokemon cards. You walk in with a Charizard, they're going to push everybody out of the way and say, "I'm sorry, sir. Let me help you, and I'm going to buy that card," right? So how do we get them interested in buying this game? Because I have tons and tons of cards around here. I would like them to go to players, but at the same time, if my play group in my area has kind of maybe, I don't want to say collapsed because that's not the proper word. It has gone to the people that are playing at the professional level, and they play a lot, and that is not my play style. So I have backed off of going to the armories because I'm just frankly not good enough to keep up with them, and it's kind of disheartening to go and pay the $5 or whatever and just basically play to lose, which, you know, is actually part of the game system, right? That's not a bad thing in the ecosystem. It's just the you got a winner and you got a loser, and it's best of one, right? So if you're playing best of one, I'm at an 80% lost ratio and a 20% win. And my hero Dash, who I very much, you know, enjoy, it's my mechanologist that, you know, really kind of got me into the game back in the whole Arcane Rising world, is going to soon come to a point where that hero will living legend out, and I'll have to switch to like Teklevossen or Dash IO. So I'm starting to buy those cards because I can still use some of the main items. But looking at more of a basic level, I know that was kind of a really huge tangent there, but looking at the basic level of both being a Gen Con and these first strike decks, do you see like the casual person coming up at Gen Con and really liking these? Or it's not called Blitz, like there's a name change? It just back and forth on this is kind of my brain spattering against a wall, but I'll turn it over to you for where that goes. So
no, I think that I love that Flesh and Blood and LSS. I mean, they're really trying their best to get new people into the game, and I think even still, with their advocacy
grow the casual crowd.
For this game, they are still seeing growth, even though their main focus is not casual play.
Correct.
And
yeah.
I think that's very, very good, right? It's good for an LGS to see that, because these cards, I mean, like, you know, you take a look at the marvels that you pull from Heavy Hitters or from Part the Mistveil, and I think any LGS can go, yeah, I can crack open a few cases of this and sell the singles. Like, the Majestics are going for a decent amount, and
that's changed in recent years too. They used to be,
yeah.
I mean, there was a point in Uprising where I was getting Majestics at like 10 cents a Majestic. Like, it was insane. So
yeah, they're pretty, I mean, depending on the set, obviously they're pretty cheap, I guess is the word, right? But again, that all comes down to whether or not the hero is relevant, or if the hero is currently, you know, we just got an announcement for the next set for Rosetta and Tales of Aria cards, a set that had not been touched for like almost a year at this point, and cards were just declining in value besides some of the legendaries.
I got a box of it, or Tales of Aria, right?
Yeah, there you go. It's I mean, they spiked super hard when Rosetta was announced, and I think now people are again realizing that the print run was a lot. So card prices are going down again. So
I looked at what I had, and I was like, oh, they're saying that card's worth this much. I have 25 of them. Let me see if does anybody want one. Like, you know, it's a very intriguing concept, because yeah, those early sets, there were both a first edition and an unlimited, right? The whole 2.0 brought in the age of having one print run, I think, with starting with Uprising, and I like that change, because while I can't get the alternate art Channel Lake Frigid or cold foils in this for a player, I mean, I could open 2 or 3 of these, or a case, you know, at maybe $150 or $200, you know, circa pre this, you know, Rosetta announcement, and I could have enough stuff to, if you ignore the legality of the heroes, I'm not going to get into the living legend argument of that, but you could make a good enough deck with the commons and be very hyper competitive-ish, running like a Briar with all the stuff in there, and, you know, doing Cheerios Briar or whatever you want to do, because most of those cards existed within that ecosystem, which is kind of a weird parallel to Mistveil, because Mistveil has talents, right? And that's the only set that really exists currently for that mystic talent. So will it be a bubble, or will they continue that forward? So as the game grows, I have questions for the long term. Similar to how they stopped doing the supplemental sets, the Everfest, the Dynasties, because, or Dust Till Dawn, was kind of an example of that. But it sounds like they may not do those supplemental non-draftable sets going forward, from my understanding. And these first strike decks, are good indication of maybe how they're planning on releasing some of those cards that originally were seen in those supplemental or bonus sets, maybe.
Yeah, I think the first strike decks are certainly something that I'm hoping works out for Legend Story Studios, and I hope it works out for Flesh and Blood, because I want more people to get into the game. And as far as the supplement, obviously, I think they've dived pretty deep into the expansion slot,
Yes.
instead of them doing a specific set for cards that just help every hero, instead they're going, well, we have like 15 to 20 cards that are in this set that appear in like 1 in every 8 packs or something, and you can get them there, which I think is fine, because honestly it means they don't have to print an entirely separate product that is going to do poorly.
Correct.
But also, in the other end, you take
what
a look
happens
at
2-3 years from now when I can't
Right.
find that box of Bright Lights that has 1 or 2 expansion card slots for another class that was not a part of that, or vice versa. I've discovered for the Evo, because I mentioned Mechanologist, I'm having to go to TCG Player and buy enough of those Evos so that if I wanted to have a pot of UPF players have 2 or 3 Tekla-Vossens, because again, I'm also planning for PvE. I know they keep saying it's not coming. Please come out soon. I really want it to come. But if I want 4 Mechanologists to go against something, I got to have, 3, 6, 9, 12 copies of a card, because that is the number in which you could have, up to, well, you guys, I'm assuming 4, right? Maybe you have 6, 8, 12, whatever. I'm not going to get that many of them. But yeah, it's going to be interesting in 5 years to say, hey, look back, that first, set that had supplemental cards. What was that? Was it Dust Till Dawn? Was that the first one?
The first set with supplemental cards was actually Crucible of War. Crucible of War was the first supplemental set in which it had stuff for all the Arcane Rising and the Welcome to Wraith heroes. So
yeah, okay, yes, I get what you're saying with that. I guess what I'm referring to is this true expansion slot in 2.0, though. The only Majestic piece.
Dynasty probably was
Dynasty,
the first
okay.
thing. Yeah, so because Dynasty came right after Uprising, and that gave out a whole bunch of stuff. But Dynasty on its release wasn't doing super great, because the ecosystem for Flesh and Blood is, again, very much so derived on singles based on people's preferences for heroes, what's doing well in the meta, what's got the waifu tax. You've got a whole bunch of things in which, like, this is what's determined to be what is going to sell well on the market. And I think
make an ugly Mechanologist. I'd want an ugly Mechanologist,
exactly,
so
right.
I can get everything cheap. Like,
just a super ugly Mechanologist. It's funny because, like, it's all based around hero preference. Let's, like, even taking a look at Betsy, right? Betsy is a hero that came out in heavy hitters, and I think every Guardian player who was dived deep into Guardian has looked at Betsy and gone, why would I play Betsy when Bravo is still available? And so,
but one day Bravo won't be available.
Exactly. One day Bravo won't be available. But that means that right now, if you plan to play for the next 10 plus years, if Bravo ends up actually LLing ever, for one, we're already getting a new Guardian with the first strike decks, which I don't know whether or not they're going to be an adult version of that Guardian ever.
I hope so.
I mean, I would be very, very happy to see. But luckily with Betsy, I mean, she's available in both CC and in Young Hero formats, and her adult Marvel right now, $79. $79 for a Marvel is kind of insane, and I think it's just, again, because people are not playing the hero. You look at the young Marvels for any of these heroes, whether it be Part the Mistveil or it be heavy hitters, and the young Marvels, because not the player base is mostly formed around Classic Instructed, you're not getting a lot of people who want to buy the young Marvels, so they end up going down in price significantly until eventually they sell. Then they kind of stick around that price until something like, hopefully, PvE comes out and people want to start playing more PvE. But for first strike decks, I'm not going to say I'm in love with the product. I'm not going to say I'm in love with the product because
I was confused.
Yeah,
I like it, but I'm confused.
Yeah, I want there to be, I guess we have to know what the deck list consists of first. But the fact that they announced Aurora, a hero for Rosetta,
Yep.
and they said, "Hey, we're going to have blitz decks that are available in this long box that you can buy." One of the new products that apparently did well enough with Part the Mistveil that they made another one, which is great.
Sure. I
But
liked it. I like those format.
yeah, and they're great. But I'm wondering whether or not the this first strike deck is going to have something completely different. Are they going to have unique cards like the Armory decks do?
Chicken and egg
Are
scenario.
gonna be
Maybe
different?
maybe they were developed in two different teams at two separate times with the same core hero, but maybe I would find it really odd. The first strike deck is the identical same deck to the blitz
Yeah.
deck in the other, because then why would I want to? If I bought the first strike deck, why would I want to go buy the collection box for Rosetta?
Exactly. Not to mention the fact that something that I personally, we talked about how it was kind of formally blitz, right? Like how the first strike decks seem like they're just changing to be what was once the blitz decks. While they're still selling the blitz decks, they're not selling blitz decks individually anymore for these new sets. They are simply, you have to buy the long box if you want to do that, unless you want to buy them online. But the first strike decks are decks you can just pick up individually, and this set comes with two decks, and they both work well into each other. But the problem that I have is that if they work well into each other, that's great, but that means that you're kind of bottlenecking yourself into a situation where if you come out with first strike decks for the next set, you're not going to have Aurora be able to go against the next hero in that first strike deck, because it's not going to teach you the same mechanics. So, if you don't have Arcane Barrier when you're going up against a Runeblade, and you sit there and go, "Oh, well, how does this mechanic work?" You're not going to be able to learn that. So you're going to have to strictly buy the Rosetta heroes for First Strike, if you want to learn anything about those specific heroes. And I feel like it's just going to kind of get to be a jumbled mess like it is already with the blitz decks that it prior.
I think it's impossible to put an entire card game or board game, for that matter, into a singular product. I look at Magic because I remember there being these two-player starter decks. I think I have one sitting in my back room from like Elf vs. Goblin or something like that. Like, how to get in. Many games have done variations of this. Pokemon, as an example, has a red box. It's a real freaking huge, I have one sitting over there. I could go grab it, but it's just like three really basic starter decks. And yeah, they have the, Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur, I think, in this one or whatever, so they look pretty. They'll get the kids nostalgic for some of that stuff, but they're not competitive. They're not really, I think they're just designed to teach the fundamentals of the game, but at the same token, that doesn't contain the other items. Where now my dogs hear a siren. That's fantastic. I don't know if you can hear them in the background. Love it. Two German Shepherds and a Morkie.
He sounds hype. They sound hype.
I love it. The first strike decks, I mean, there's just so much. I'm gonna wait for them to
No worries.
be done. Hi, buddy. Yeah. Okay. Now see, it's Friday. That's why. I'm like, Oh, it's because they do the set test of the siren on Fridays. That's why.
Oh, they do it on Fridays in Indiana? That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's
Just
about
gotta be
this
different.
time.
Gotta be different.
Yeah, welcome to Indiana. So, the first strike decks, though, you're right. I think if it is a bubbled ecosystem, I'm more curious why they picked the same hero that's in the blitz deck. And the other kind of weird catch to this is we saw what happened with the Armory KO deck day one launch, right? They were kind of short supply. People bought them up, and then people were saying, "Oh, that chess piece is $50 to $100." Well, hopefully nobody bought that, right? Because we all know that that's not how you should do it. You don't go buy the hype. You wait for it to settle down, and then you get it. But maybe, if these even contain commons, as an example, that are not in the set, but those commons are deemed by players worthwhile to be in a meta deck. Well, now, do you get them in the set, or do you buy these? Is somebody buying out 6 or 7 of these, which takes away from the new players? Like, I hope that's not going to happen, right? But that's a fear in the back of my mind. We obviously don't have the deck list. I'm just speculating here, but that's the only concern I have is how are they structuring these? Because you're right, if they play against each other, that's good. But how do they hold up against, I haven't opened these because they're just randomly laying here. I got a Briar Blitz deck. I got a Levia Blitz deck. I got a Lexi Blitz deck. These are just old random ones I had laying around. Are they comparable to those? Do they hold their own footing? Can they play against them? All these unknown questions, right? Like I don't know how to answer that.
It's very it's a they want them to be unique and to have a new a first player experience. And I think that the fact they're still not selling, they're giving out Ira decks. The Ira Welcome deck is something that had really helped a lot of people get into Flesh and Blood. That is how they have been doing these learn to play things.
I have a copy that I still have sleeved up and I keep with me.
Yeah, and they're gonna. And I mean, they still give them out at learn to play events. There's going to be a learn to play event at Gen Con, and it's going to be very, very nice. And I think, onboarding new players, it seems to be very easy because I think a lot of it is people have kind of a sunk cost fallacy in their favorite games, and sometimes when they look at a game like Flesh and Blood and they're like, oh wow, this is kind of an interesting, unique thing, all they need to do is play it, right? That's kind of the big deal. You just play it, you figure it out. But the First Strike decks, they're just blitz decks with very specific, linear mechanics, whereas one is focusing more so on defense and then coming in with a really big attack, where another is looking to go wide and be a little bit quicker in their attacks and maybe have smaller attack power. But overall, we're not, if you're trying to put it very linear like that, that's a very good way to do it because you're teaching people what the go wide strategy versus the go tall strategy, what the defensive values are as far as defense reactions, whereas, there could be attack reactions in Runeblade for Aurora. So there are options available that they can do, and I think it'd be very nice to see something streamlined like that, but I almost would have expected something that's more like a 30 card deck that's very much so you don't have to worry about the initial blitz deck size or the 2-ofs or anything. You just learn how to play and you can go from there.
Do you know my number one problem with these First Strike decks? And it's the most obvious problem once I say this, and it's a gripe I've had time and time again. Okay, this is that First Strike deck. It's in my hand. I'm a new player. It comes in, from what I can tell, does not appear, I will not say because we haven't seen one physically, does not appear any thicker than this. It does, I believe, state somewhere on their page that it'll have, where's the product page? Don't they have a tech spec on this where it says the product sheet, 40 cards or something?
Yep, 40 cards, hero weapon, equipment, and tokens.
Got it. So what is the number one thing that if I go to my LGS and have no one to teach me, what do I typically need with this game, which was in the 2-player Dory vs. Rhinar, which everybody shit on. I didn't. I mean, I get it was a little expensive, but for what it was, I think it actually is a superior product. I don't have a game mat. I don't have a paper plane. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I know that's a gripe I've had. It's been a recurring theme on my channel is that, Pokemon can do it. Magic definitely does it. Grand Archive's done it. Sorcery can do it. Other games, when you buy it, even One Piece, I demoed that. Battle Spirit Saga, they all come with just a stupid little paper throwaway playmat that has some generic rules on it. I understand that's cheesy. It's not high professionalism. I can also see the green argument, right? There's sides to many stories, but the fact of the matter is, unless I get taught how to play this by somebody who knows how to play, which I guess could be the case if you're at Gen Con, right? But if you buy this and take it home and say, I want to play, is it scan this QR code and watch a video on how to play, and then you have to go online, which means now I have to have internet service, I have to have a cell phone, I get these are first world things, right? But if you want to grow everywhere, that's not an everybody thing. And I'm trying to not sound pompous, I'm trying to not come off as a butthead here, but like, I know I'm privileged in certain aspects, right? I'm in a studio, I'm in a warm house, I have all these things, but like, if you want to get to more people, sometimes it's not everybody has access to that stuff. I don't know. That's a.
I hear you. I mean, it's a valid thing that I've heard from several people in regards to new player product. Is that even with the Armory deck, right? When the KO Armory deck came out, everybody was griping about the fact that it did not come with a physical booklet or something or some kind of brochure to tell you how to play the game and how it works.
Such a big box. I mean,
yeah,
but
you see, it does have that QR code on the back to bring you to that website, which is the Flesh and Blood website, where they created a online virtual demo for you to play in order for you to learn the game in that sense. But of
Which
course,
is fantastic on a computer, horrible on a cell phone, mind
yeah,
you.
not super great on mobile, I gotta say. But to be fair, I haven't really like dived super deep into it. But I'm sure, Flesh and Blood has always kind of been more about the physical and less about the digital,
100%.
which is why I think having a physical, booklet in any of these starter decks is the way they should be going. Now, obviously, we don't know if that's going to be the case with these First Strike decks. I doubt it, because at that point, if it's going to be in such a small box, you're not going to get a whole lot of information out of it. It's probably going to just bring you to the same QR code in which you're going to learn how to play. But I think that's another thing. That's another almost like great. I don't know. I don't want to call it a sales tactic, but going to a learn to play event at a big convention for a bunch of card games and board games is a great way for you to get a first-hand booklet-free experience of learning how to play the game. And it's something that I don't know, like, obviously I think every TCG does it at some point, but it's a great way to get people in. It gets people out. They're already at the convention. They want to learn something new. They go play the game. And then it's not that difficult of a game to learn from a very basic standpoint. So you leave there with a ton of information, and you're able to, sell that information to other people and go, hey, this is how the game works. You might be interested in this. Here's a Blitz deck. We can play against one another and make it happen.
I think it's more important in the aspect of the Blitz decks, these First Strikes, Blitz/First Strike, whatever we want to refer to them as. Obviously, it's named First Strike. There's an English version, and it does look like, because there is a Japanese logo here, and from what I understand, there is a Japanese version of these, right? So now you have, again, the market that they're getting into with Japan. So you have Japanese individuals trying to probably learn this for the first time. So are there other marketing assets and materials for them to be able to do that? I'm curious if that exists, right? So there's I finally found the working product sheet for the First Strike. Apparently you have to go to like the digital assets and whatever. The other link does not work.
Yeah.
But inside of that one, it does state the 40 cards plus hero plus weapon plus equipments, and then 4 per case, 6 of each hero, 3 per, so $11.99. The price point seems good. So like looking at the price point, right, this is about the price point that most people, I would say, is an acceptable to get into a game. 10-12 bucks is that's excellent. I think $70 for the large collection of boxes, as an example, the Mistvale collection, a little high, but if you use the map minus the 20%, which I think most LGSs typically get to about that area, you're talking $55-60. That is the equivalent of a Pokemon Elite Trainer box. That is, in my opinion, perfectly great territory. People are willing to spend that money, especially if they can get marbles. You get booster packs, you get a little variety in it. I do like the inclusion of booster packs in these. I think that adds a long-term extra layer of spiciness to this, because at some point 5-10 years down the road, right, if I have a sealed version of the Part the Misfell collection on a shelf, right, and one of these marvels is $1 million hypothetically, then that box that I have, which has 1 or 2 sealed packs, has a minuscule, maybe impossible, but possible chance to have one of those magically within that years down the road, even if I can't find a sealed box somewhere because the box just no longer exists. So I like that, and maybe I was actually hoping in my version of First Strike that the First Strike deck would be exactly as maybe was like a Blitz deck, but it would have a playmat. It would have a sample booster pack. It's actually, I don't know where I put it. I had it in my hand a second ago. Oh no, I lost it. Oh no, where'd it go? Ah, here it is. I was hoping they would do something like Pokemon. This is why I brought this over. This is a 3-card booster pack that comes out on Halloween. And, like, it's a sampler. Like, it's not anything special. You're not going to get anything that's going to break the bank, but you get, like, a random foil card. You get some basic stuff. But, like, it's just the experience of I get something tiny with that deck, and maybe it's useful, right? Maybe instead of it being completely random, maybe it's a subset of cards that go with that hero, and then, like, you get 1 of 5 foil cards, again, adding some collectability and chase into it. But then you could add these 3 cards to that deck, but you could switch them out or whatever, and maybe one's an alternate art version of the hero, or one's an alternate art version of like an extended art variation of one of the cards, or for that matter, since there's a 3-card pack, right, 3's a play set. Maybe it's a play set of 3 of one of a couple variations of the commons that are in there as an extended or alternate art. Just a whole bunch of random ideas there I just threw out there, but that's where my brain always goes, is how to make it collectible and fun. Because I like
Absolutely.
ripping packs open. I love ripping packs.
Yeah, I think I think the concept to help that is really, really the fact that it doesn't really take, obviously I'm not sure on the actual logistics of it, but I don't think it takes that much additional profit away to put 2 to 3 packs and bundle them together with a blitz deck and go, hey, this is kind of how you can do this and play along with it and have a great time. Something that I often wish I had access to here, and I might even just start doing myself if I ever have the means to do it, and people are interested, is Blitz Pre-Constructed is a format in Flesh and Blood where you take those Blitz decks and you go against one another with just those Blitz decks. And
that's why I keep a copy of these unaltered. I don't know if it's close by, I'd grab it, but it's a long box. And every one of these that's ever come out, I have one copy sleeved with everything in its contents so that I could roll a D20 as an example. I think we're getting past the point where I can roll a D20.
Yeah.
And I can say, I'm going to play with this one, you roll a D20, you play with that one. And it's just an excellent way to carry it. I call it my battle box, but it's basically what I like to carry around. Because then everybody's on equal footing and I don't have to worry about, oh, you have CNCs. And I think in Commander, they call it the Commander power level or something crazy. Or there was some formula, somebody like, I'm a CEDH deck, but on turn 0, I'm going to storm you to death. It's like, wait, hold on. I didn't even get to play and I died. Wait, what happened here? Which I know, I get it, Wizards can do. There's, we have that in the game. It's just not as prolific, I guess, but...
Yeah, I think the again, my kind of gripe with the Blitz decks is that they're only really truly meant to go into one another, and that is one another specifically from the same set, which is something that I do believe is a downfall from the decks. Magic the Gathering, they have the reason that they can produce nearly any product and have it be something that somebody can learn and then grow with is because their whole basis is around 5 colors. 6
Correct.
Technically.
Yeah.
So you can do
colorless or what's the
colorless. Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
5 colors and 1 no color. But the entire concept is that no matter what you get, no matter what starter deck you get, no matter what commander precon you get, doesn't matter. You can put any cards that just adhere to the same color or the same kind of keywords, and you can make it work. But in Flesh and Blood, if you buy a History Pack 1 Blitz deck, and then
But that's the only way to get my Dash Blitz deck.
Well, exactly, right? But that Dash Blitz deck comes with Arcane Barrier, and that's super
that
great.
one does, yes, yeah. Now that's important.
Yeah, but so if you roll a D20 and you get a Kano, but your opponent rolls a D20 and they get freaking
Rhinar.
I don't know, new even.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You're able to stomp your opponent because your opponent doesn't have Arcane Barrier in that situation, and that's something that is that was a miss for me for the KO deck, the Armory deck for KO, because they didn't include I think
did they? I have it right here because I'm actually bringing it with me to so I'm going to Origins this weekend. That's one of the that's the convention, kind of like Gen Con but a little bit smaller. Yep, there is no Arcane Barrier with the equipment suite, so you are correct.
There's no Arcane Barrier, and there was gripe that some of the $5 Majestics didn't get reprints in there that were really big power cards, but I think really at the end of the day, it's the fact that there are 2 things that exist in Flesh and Blood. There is physical damage, and then there is arcane damage. And
currently,
if you
there might be more later.
Yeah, or more, right? But that's with the addition now. If you've got this next set, which is a all arcane set, you have to realize that if you are trying to teach the game to somebody else and you say, hey, I have unpreventable damage because your beginner product did not come with a way to prevent damage from this, that feels bad, even though the null room equipment is not expensive.
I would expect that gets reprinted in the next set. I would imagine that Rosetta is where the next one comes, because otherwise I was sorting through all my bulk that I have. I have stacks of each one of those. I need to start getting those to people, or now that you mention it, I need to put a couple in my battle box to have 2 or 3 of each of the head, feet, arms, and chest, so that I could just say, hey, if you do roll against that, that's a great example of here's some equipment from the armory that you can choose to swap things out, because truthfully, looking at calling out Fabry here, I really enjoy Fabry for the search engine. There is a epic amount of equipment and weapons in the game of Flesh and Blood. And like if I go T armor or no equipment,
yeah, T equipment.
And then how do I get
one.
generic? It's going to be like subtype equipment?
You do C generic, so like class is generic.
T equip. There's a whole master class somebody could teach on just the structure of.
I've done a lot of searching through Fabrary. So yeah, T colon equipment gives you the typing, and then C colon is the class. So
there's 71 total in the game, and if you were to remove, so if I go rarity, I think it's R, and just go C comma R comma T. There's 61 pieces of equipment that are pennies on the dollar. That really, if you had like, I think I brought this up in your chat the other day, but like I didn't realize it. But so is Arcane Lantern valid in Clash, because it is a rare, but it's an offhand? Is that still or
so believe it or not, it's also valid in Commoner too, because you can have rare or common equipment in both formats. So if Commoner isn't just Commoner, it used to be. Prior to a change that they made, I want to say sometime early last year, they made a change because you were originally only able to have 2 pieces of rare equipment in Commoner, and the rest had to be common. But they changed it to where now it's just all rare. You can have all rare equipment if it allows it, or you can have all common equipment, whatever, or you can have a mixed match of each. But in Clash, the only thing that is allowed to be a Majestic or higher as far as your equipment slot goes is your weapon. So not your offhand, just your weapon. So
gotcha.
That is the case there.
I do want to at some point dive into more of those and get some very detailed information. Oh, Popped Collar Polo, by the way, is also on this list. So
yep.
Even though that is technically, I don't know what rarity, that's a promo. So how does that even count?
It is a promo, but technically the card is just Blossom of Spring, but an alternate art, and so it's totally fine.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Yeah, there's some promos that aren't like that aren't available to be played yet. For instance, something that is able to be, according to Fabrary at least, when you look at it, you have things like the cosplay promos, which are very very interesting, because one of the cosplay promos is like, play this and then equip Crown of Providence.
Yep.
Which you just can't do, right? You can't do that in Clash. And so because it's a promo, it doesn't technically have a rarity, but I think if it's something like the Snapdragon Scalers, we haven't exactly talked about whether or not that's like a
I've been working on trying to collect all those to get enough to build a deck, but that is just like the umpteenth degree of impossible with like cost prohibition and having a tailor. I think tailor's like $3,000, so like that deck alone would be multi-thousands of dollars just to bring it to sit at a table. It's like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that.
At that point
I will proxy the heck out of it and play it, because that will be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fun thing to try out and play, but that's why I'm very happy that cosplayers get their own like specific prizes in the situation, and that they go for a lot on the open market, because that means that their hard work does in fact pay off without them having to get like a cash prize.
100%. And the York deck. I mean, that was another one. I want to build a York cube. Which that's going to be a nightmare, because obviously while you could try and put real cards like the Command and Conquers and things, I could also make it just a meme deck and be like, this, York only cracked baubles as an example. I mean, technically that's not legal, but if you're doing that, nobody, whatever, it's what it is, kind of a thing.
Exactly.
So I bought like 30 or 40 of the gold, or not the cold foil baubles, because I collect baubles. That's my thing. Everywhere I look, there is stacks of baubles, just because I've been, I don't know why, I love that card. I even graded 2. Actually, at the next Worlds, I need to contact somebody to try to get the, so the first Worlds, I graded a WTR Alpha bauble that I bought from somebody, because it wasn't foil or anything, I didn't have one, so I got it. And then the second Worlds, which was last year, I graded an Arcane Rising bauble. And the third year, I want to get a Crucible of War bauble. So I'm going to go every set, every year that they do Worlds. I'm going to try to get it graded, because it has
I don't know. Did they make a crack bauble for Crucible of War?
They did, and there's a foil, actually. So
I was about to say, I was like, normally that's draft stuff, and I don't think Crew had a draft, but that is kind of cool. They did have that in there.
So I was going to at least get that for the third worlds. I got to find somebody that I can convincingly be like, hey, if you own one, I'll buy it off you, or just take it with you and I'll pay for the grading and whatever. Or we need to find somebody to be like, here, I'm shipping you one, and then I'll have that so I can have my bauble collection in the background at some point. Just because, again, I'm silly and stupid, and I would love to just continue that trend, because it's just, why not? Like, fantastic stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun thing, you know, and I think it's from the concept, you know, you got to have fun with what you're trying to do, right? And if you're gonna be a collector or a player or what have you, getting started into something like this is super, I don't know, it's freeing almost, because there's not really a path you go down, right? It's whatever you like to do, whether you like to play at commoner and you just want to play with budget stuff and you don't feel like you have like the mental fortitude to get into hyper competitive stuff, you can just play in commoner. If you just want to collect, you can just collect, and you can just wait for new things to come out and then just hold off on that. So
here's something that I've been throwing around in my brain for a while. You mentioned the legality in Clash and Commoner about commons and rares. There is a ban and restricted list. And one of the things that I've been thinking about as the game has progressed, right, which, one, kudos to Legendary Studios, because there is not a lot of cards in this ban and restricted list, period. Like, just overall, compared to the number of cards released and, number of sets, I think they're averaging about like one a set, even though it's not really one a set, just some certain scenarios kind of existed. And right now it's a ban per format. So it's like this card is banned exclusively within that format itself. So what are your thoughts on doing like maybe a ban at a hero level? So like as an example, Ball Lightning could come back, because originally Ball Lightning was slated as a problem for Briar, but now that these new heroes are there, that elemental Ball Lightning would be maybe fun to have with a different elemental hero. Thoughts?
Believe it or not, it's something that we are actually looking to test out in Clash. This is something that
cool.
I'm very, very obviously it has not been finalized yet. We're still in talks, because we are making sure to vote on things like this. But when our leagues happen, we kind of want to make them unique every single time, because we want to really determine what the format stands as. And Ball Lightning was banned in Commoner, and Clash uses the Commoner ban list on top of a couple other things. And so with Ball Lightning being banned, we were like, okay, well, it's a powerful card. It did a lot in Commoner back when Aria was a big, was the only thing that most people had.
Sure.
And now that the pool has grown, we kind of want to see whether or not it is a big bad card. I mean, obviously we know the power levels exist, and they're very prevalent. You look at things like Duskblade, and you look at Belittle and Stubby Hammers, all these cards that have been, problems in other formats. We just kind of want to determine whether or not they are actually a problem. I know obviously from an LSS standpoint, they look at these cards and they go, yeah, well, we've got enough people who they want to see change in the format, and these are cards that do provide like their staples in every single one of them. But with the release of the new heroes from Rosetta, we kind of wanted to see whether or not unbanning Duskblade and even Ball Lightning would be something that would be a fun little way for us to kind of slowly erase what would have been a ban list for Clash, and see whether or not that's actually such an incredibly prominent threat to the point where people aren't able to play anything else. And if our top 8 is just Aurora and Lexi and Briar, because Lightning is just so insanely crazy,
yep,
then we can go, okay, that didn't work, let's
lesson learned,
do it right. And so that's the entire thing. I think that I'm happy that there are per format bans, but unfortunately per format bans do kind of hold some kind of problem when it comes to other heroes of the same talent and or class. And
gotcha.
That's when you look at things like the Living Legend restricted list is something that is very interesting, because the Living Legend restricted list is now no longer they're not doing a banned and suspended anymore. They're doing banned and restricted. So they will restrict cards to one copy of each in order for you to kind of determine that card's power level. But it is,
which that's like adding the word legendary to that card, because
exactly,
legendary cards can only have one in in Blitz it would be one of 2, and in CC it'd be one of 3.
Yeah, and it's I like that they have the restricted available, and it's a good way to start doing changing up formats without them being so detrimental as to removing the entire card. But something that people have looked into, and I'm not sure exactly if this is, I guess, the right call, because when an ice card gets banned, when there are three ice heroes at the same time, when an ice card that is prominent in every hero but only one hero is abusing it, and then that card gets banned, it feels bad for every other person who's also playing ice.
Correct.
And that is kind of the big downfall with all of that. So I've heard talks that people really want to have hero specific bans, like X hero can only use one copy of this card, or X hero can't use any copies of this card because their abilities just innately ruin. They bring the power level of that card up way higher than it should be. And I like the concept of doing that, although I'm sure it is going to be a lot of, I guess it's a lot of testing work on LSSN to really make that choice, which is why I'm very happy that I am in the committee of a format that is more run by the fans and the people who play it, because we can just make those choices on the fly and go like, hey, what do you guys think about it? As opposed to having to get the consensus of the entirety of the Flesh and Blood community and go, hey, how would you feel about Awakening coming back, but only for, Bravo and not for Terra or Victor or anything, and, being an interesting thing there. So, it is different, and obviously Flesh and Blood is changing day by day, month by month, so we could see something like that down the line. But I think as long as it is a card that is genuinely, like, ruining a format, if it's something that is a game-ruining, card, I think that card should be banned no matter what, even if it does hurt other heroes, but
sure,
it's all up in the air.
You mentioned the Living Legend leaderboard, so I want to kind of focus on that for a minute, if we can. Early years, right, as the board has progressed, I've made Excel spreadsheets and stuff to try to track this because it's an intriguing concept, but, like, there were 4 heroes in the first set, 4 heroes in the second set, so that's the OG 8, and you kind of added more on in Crucible of War with the youngs, but those really weren't adults in your first set of more. It just, every set you're adding 2 to 3, 4 heroes. And I think somewhere along the line, I think James said there was like upwards of 15 plus or something this year that were coming, right? So if you take into account what we've already seen with Part the Mistveil and these heroes, the First Strike heroes that are coming, and you start adding that up, that kind of leaves us to where the whole year is pretty much rounded out with these heroes that have already been discovered and been released. And right now, the Living Legend leaderboard for Classic Constructed has a total of 26 that have points, 27 when you add new, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that have already hit Living Legend. So you're kind of, you have at least, the first 2 sets worth of heroes cycled out, but your pool of available options is right at about 30. There's a reason I'm mathing this way. And in Blitz, you have 34 that have points, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 additional heroes that have not even got points yet. So you have closer to 45 or 50 by the time this probably releases. You'll have probably 50 in the Blitz format. At what point do you think is too many choices versus they're going to have to circle back, and because this list can't just keep growing forever, like the points, people have to get Living Legend out at a certain point, right? How do you feel about, is this list going to get too big? Because now that we're 13 sets in, you've seen the ebb and flow, but case in point, my favorite, Dash, ranked number 1 right now, 835. There's a chance she'll be gone this season, but she came out set 2. This would be exiting set 13. That means she existed for 10 sets. Is that the lifespan expectancy? That's what my spreadsheet kind of was tracking, right, is the set release and the Living Legend end point, right? Trying to figure out at what set they released at, how long, how many months they were valid, right? Because like standard rotation in some games is 2 years or whatever, things like that. What are your thoughts?
I think overall, I don't think that there needs to be any kind of like limitation, I guess, on the heroes, which is crazy, right? Because like 50 heroes is a lot to go over in something like Blitz, right? And Blitz has unique heroes that you can only play in Blitz that you can't play in Classic Constructed, which is why that list is so much longer. For instance, like obviously the
The
Blaze promo that
Emperor
you're able to get,
Blaze.
you can
Yeah.
play you can play that only in Blitz. She only has a young version of herself right now. Terra, which is also coming out at Gen Con, is also currently only available in young. They were not announced as a hero for Rosetta, so they very well might not be getting an adult version of themselves until much later. And
Professor Teklevosen's on here apparently too.
yeah, Professor Teklevosen, who is not actually Teklevosen. Professor Teklevosen, a different hero, but still kind of the same, is only available in Blitz and not available in Classic Constructed. And so there's a lot of heroes that are available in Blitz, and I feel like that variety is really good.
Oh,
I
sure.
think the issue the issue isn't so much the fact that there is a lot of variety, because variety is, the spice of life, as we all know, and it is something that is going to help people give themselves a place and feel comfortable and really like speak to their own needs and play the heroes they want. The thing with that is that when you look at something like the actual Blitz format, where there are at least like 20 plus Classic Constructed organized play formats that happen in a year, there are one Blitz format that happens, and it's Skirmish.
Sure.
Skirmish is just a fun little casual thing for you to go and play, and that is the only time outside of a Blitz Battle Harden, which don't seem to happen anymore. It's the only time you get living legend points for these young heroes, and so
You think they'll
their
rename it with
lifespan-
the first strikes?
What was that?
You think they'll rename it with like how the first strike is? Like they'll kind of rebrand Blitz into a whole different thing and use the living legend board for Blitz as maybe like the first strike board or something? Or
No, I think they're going to keep with Blitz. I don't think the name... I think, like, directly, obviously, like, the first strike decks seem just like Blitz decks, but, their purpose directly is going to be exactly like any other Blitz deck, which is just to get people into the game. So I think I don't know why they called them anything different, but I guess we're going to find out when we find out what's in the lists. But I think overall, the Living Legend board either needs to be, like, really fine-tuned in Blitz, or there need to be more Blitz organized play events, because if you're really trying to get this Blitz format more concise, then you're going to have to make sure that more of these happen, even if there's just like 3 skirmishes a year. That's better than anything. If skirmishes go on for weeks and a bunch of LGSs around the world run a skirmish in which the winner gets living legend points and they go from there. But there need to be more of them if there needs to be a direct change, because there's a very, very fast change in Classic Constructed. I mean, you look at heroes like KO, who within his first month of him being a viable hero is already above half of the living legend points that he needs in order to hit that living legend status and no longer be able to be played in Classic Constructed.
But I kind of like the speedrun heroes. Like, I mean, Bravo was a great example. People were, like, up in arms at how effective Bravo was. But the thing is that I think set the tonality for the direction of Flesh and Blood. I feel like a thesis paper could be written on this, because that one hero showed both the power and the strength of a good and or bad, depending on who you talk to, design of a hero. The access to card pool. One of the things that I really love about Fabre, and I don't know if it's card distribution. They still have this out here. It is one of the most intriguing maps I have ever seen, because similar to other games like Magic and I guess Pokemon, where you have like the 5 colors in Magic and you say, I have X amount of access to whatever, right? There's no restriction. Well, in Flesh and Blood, there is restriction based on your class. So I guess I could maybe show a little bit of this on the screen. It's going to be backwards. I apologize for that, but nothing I can do about it. But look at Adjudicator has almost 100 cards, while Bard has, 10. But before, let's say, I guess Bright Light's released, right? This Mechanologist option was like way the hell down here in like 150. So you'll notice that the distribution of cards per class, Wizard's actually pretty low. But guess what? I guarantee if you take a screenshot of this, that Wizard number is going to pop up to the 300 range probably, and you're going to have Runeblade. Where's Runeblade? Probably Runeblade's going to get a little bit more, right? These will all become more even across the board. Like if you look at 10 equipment, right, there's not a lot of choice. 20, 20, 20, 20, 30, 30. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of wizard choice equipments versus maybe Runeblade. Maybe Runeblade only gets 2 or 3. Wizard probably gets 5 or 6, because I feel like they're trying to normalize across the entire spectrum. Or in the case where you have like, you know, a draconic talent, right, or a mystic talent, I believe is the options, right? Those are cards that exist within that. So it's just the data behind it is really crazy to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think overall you're expected to see more and more as they release more stuff for the series. You know, you're going to see those card pools rise, and it's certainly going to be helpful in regards to kind of making your deck more tuned towards the way it should be. At least, you know, not even so much tuned to the way it should be. It should give you more variety as to how you can build your deck. You know, you don't just have to build it one way. That's something I actually enjoy about Dash. I don't personally play her in Classic Constructed, but it is something that was amazing to me when I first learned about her. How your sideboard can just change your entire hero.
Correct.
In no time flat. You can go, okay, cool. Your hero is more aggressive. I get to put it in a defensive package. Your hero is more mid-range. I get to put it in a huge aggressive package, and you're not going to be able to block me out. And that kind of versatility is something that I really enjoy out of a card game, because it's not just like, oh, I have to counter this specific color or this specific, you know, archetype because there's only like 3 decks in the meta and that's what I have to counter.
Sure.
Instead, people play what they want to play. I mean, there's still... Runeblade has been lacking for years. Maybe not years. Maybe like a year or 2 now. And I guess that is technically years. But it is still... I know people who only play Viserai, and they play like Nebula Blade Viserai, even when Rosetta was a legal, you know, weapon you could play as Viserai. They'd play Nebula Blade because they love it. They love the thematic of it. They love how they play it. They love the concept of it. And I feel like it really speaks to, you know, being connected with a hero and a class and knowing how they play. And I believe that having that over time, you're going to see more and more cards enter the fray and be kind of a, you know, there's staples in every deck, but I think slowly but surely they're trying to kind of phase out staples and allow for other things to occur.
I have a love-hate with generics because, hypothetically, you know, I really like Merchant. I want to play with PvE with Merchant, but because there are not a lot of options for that, right? The generic cards, for better or for worse, I stockpiled the crap out of generic cards because I know that as a player, as a collector, as a connoisseur of everything, generic works with every class. One day there will be something. Sadly, I missed the boat with the whole lifeblood, whatever that one, the poison the well thing. I don't know what I don't know why. They're 50 cents a card. I should have bought at least 6 to have, right, or whatever, because I'm not trying to buy it out, but I need to have enough to play. But now there's $6 a card. So if I really wanted to go get these for my UPF deck, I only have like 2 copies versus I should have had my 6 or 12. So it's like, dang it, I really missed the boat on that one.
Yeah, the generics are certainly something that is a highly contested idea, because a lot of people like to have those generics eventually be phased out by something that is more class specific. Mm-hmm. But being able to have something that affects everything is just really good. But I've been liking the generics that they've been coming out with recently, because they seem to be more thematic on, like, it just does a blanket thing, as opposed to it being like, this is a staple in every single deck. And
Coax of Commotion's a good example, right? Like, the Coax of Commotion card was pretty expensive, and then I think it dropped down with it being released in the Round the Table product, if I recall. So that was kind of exciting, because now they're only 25 cents. But at one point, I think that was a $10 or $15 card, which was kind of insane to me, but, you know, it is what it is. Probably could have got rid of a couple at that point and been, you know, better off, but I really don't sell a lot of the cards that I'm using for the decks, but I do, you know, try to get the blitz decks together for people and things like that. But, you know, that's, yeah. I guess that kind of leads me to my other question here, which is the product suite that Flesh and Blood offers, right? So it's pretty much, you get a booster box, and there is no other products other than now there's the First Strike and you have the Armory deck and these collection boxes. Do you think that that's a better approach than, say, other games like Magic, where I couldn't even tell you how to get the card that I'm looking for in which box of type of thing, or thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as their SKUs, I think they're doing very well. You obviously don't want to make too many, because then it's going to get, it's gonna get difficult. I mean, that is kind of the point with Magic is, if you want the really shiny fancy stuff, you got to buy a collector booster, but you also still get shiny fancy stuff in the play boosters, and so it's not like significantly different. And you in Flesh and Blood, just having a booster box, and honestly, I'm very happy that they went with the 2.0 thing. I've been happy with 2.0, where they, instead of doing the first ed and the unlimited, that they're all just in one box.
Sure.
Because now anybody has a chance at collector items like Marvels or Fables or any of that stuff, and it's very, very nice. Not that you didn't have access to that prior, because you could just buy first ed box, but it's really, Oh, look at that! Oh, dang! Look at you! Ah, God, that's beautiful. I want to get one so bad. But I think it's nice that you have access to those things as anybody, and you don't have to be like, I'm a first collector, first ed whale, and the only thing I want to get is first ed boxes. And collectors who normally have more money for this hobby as a seller or collector would, they end up buying up a whole bunch of it and not having it be for play purposes, which is where those unlimited editions are meant for, the play purposes. They don't care so much about the fancier cards or anything like that. But now you have it all in one place, and it's super well crafted. As far as I think their Armory decks are a huge hit. I think they're going to be a huge hit as time goes on. The only thing I personally worry about with the Armory decks, as well as theoretically these Blitz decks, but not so much the Blitz decks, is the Living Legend system. And when KO hits Living Legend and stores still have a KO Armory deck, luckily,
what happens to it?
Yeah, luckily there is a Living Legend format, which theoretically you could play those same cards in. The only downside is that LGSs, at least here in the States, seem to focus heavily on Classic Constructed and Classic Constructed only, and because of that, you're not going to be getting places who are just going to do a casual Living Legend night unless it is the store owners or TO's favorite format, and it's all they ever want to do is play Living Legend format on Gem. And I think that's, that comes down to what the LGS wants to do, but in most cases, Classic Constructed and people prepping for these big tournaments and these big organized play events, that is what gets people into the door for some places, and it's all they really want to put their focus into. There are several stores that care a lot about the Flesh and Blood alone, such as Min-Max Games and Realm Games. All they really, really genuinely
and
care
that's
about
good
Flesh
for the
and Blood.
ecosystem, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always going to be one or two that they are the dedicated ones, right? Like, I mean, Min-Max, obviously, I'm sure they deal in other games, because it'd be silly not to deal in Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Flesh and whatever. It's, if they're an LGS, they're going to carry products that's going to support their store, period. Now, they can be known as the go-to Flesh and Blood store, because that seems to be what they are known for. I think the Realm's another one, right? Like, there are some passionate people, and I don't think anybody's going to dethrone any of those folks that have already, solidified their positions within those communities, those ecosystems. They're reliable, that people really enjoy going to them. But as the game grows, right, new interested parties are going to come in, new people are going to start doing stuff, and looking at me, like, I'm technically I'm a single seller. I have a lot of the bulk cards. I decided to try to dabble with the, I guess for lack of a better word, penny stocks version of the game, because I felt like, not that I see this happening, so please don't click this and do the whole snippy thing, internet. I don't think Flesh and Blood is going to die, but even if it did, if it went the way of Genesis Battle of Champions or other games where when I got in, instead of me owning one card, I have a 6,000 count UPS box full of 700, 800, 900, 1,000 cards, 2,000 cards, where if nothing else, I can literally sit there and with me and a group of friends, we could build a deck and play, versus I just have one card that I could stare at and say, I have one card, great, what do I do? I can't even play with it, right? So I always enjoyed the aspect of having a bulk of games. I did this for Star Wars Unlimited, I did this for Lorcana, I tried doing it for One Piece and some other games just because I have the technology to aid me with leveraging some of that, sorting capabilities and things like that. But really, you also have to be passionate about it. I think that's the other thing that I discovered is it's not only the yeah, you could have the thing, but if I don't know a dang thing about the meta of the game, I don't understand the reason a card is whatever, I'm going to miss all the nuances of why the game is there. If you focus on something, if I know a lot more about Flesh and Blood, I know a lot more about maybe Star Wars Unlimited, I can understand the complexities that are within that, and that's one of the reasons I'm over the next probably couple of months, I'm finally done with Magic. I'm going to be liquidating all the stuff that I had because I don't play it anymore, and I mean, I'm bringing a stack of cards with me to Origins. I had no idea some of these little commons and whatever, like a common that was from Mercadian Masks. I think it was called Sneak Out or something, or Smoke Out. Or whatever. It's a black card, but it's like $10 for a common. And I'm like, I have 4 of these, so that's a meal. Like, here you go. I'm just going to, give this away and you give me a cheeseburger. Like, that's... It sounds silly, but like when you think about it, it's like if it was already costing me to go there and I'm not using it and it's just sitting in a box, like, screw it. Like, I don't know. It's just it's a fun concept when you start looking at the whole ecosystem as a whole. My brain went down that tangent probably a little too deep, but
no, I mean that's entirely it. I'm actually on the same boat. I'm sure you've seen through my streams. I mean, I'm looking to liquidate a lot of my Magic and get rid of it because I also just don't play it at a level that makes a ton of sense. And Flesh and Blood is definitely more of my jam, and I'm putting more effort into that.
Cash it in.
Yeah, cash it in. I'm telling you, it's good because it is the overall idea of most TCGs, in which most people end up getting into multiple TCGs, and when they want to fund one, they sell stuff from the other.
Correct.
Or if they want to, if they open up product, they sell the product they're not using, and then use it to buy the singles that they want. That is just generally the overall concept of a TCG. In most cases, it does not fund your future in that way, but it is able to do so. For instance, I pulled in my pre-release packs for my second pre-release I did for Barth and Misfail, I pulled a Rainbow Foil Traverse the Universe and a Cold Foil Traverse the Universe.
Wow.
In my 8 packs. And that is, I mean, I've never done that ever in my life of Flesh and Blood, and I don't buy a lot of product, but like that was amazing. And I could right now sell that Cold Foil Traverse the Universe to finally get everything I need for new. That includes all the levels of enlightenment and everything I need. And I have 2, which means I can use one for the deck and I can sell the other for the to subsidize the cost of the cards that I do not currently own. And
is that the extended art version? Because I didn't realize. I guess there's an extended art version and there's a regular.
Yep. Yeah. The regular is Rainbow Foil. The extended art is Cold Foil.
Wow, interesting. So the Rainbow Foil only comes in one. It's not a Cold Foil. Oh, there is a Cold Foil of it, I guess, too. Interesting. So there's a Cold Foil.
Not that I'm aware of. No, I think so. On TCG Player, sometimes they do this, and I don't know why they do it. I think they just assume that they have like a template, but there is not a basic Cold Foil of Traverse Universe from what I understand. The Cold Foil is only extended art. And I think you can find that on the Collector Center if you go to the Flesh and Blood TCG website.
So that's a good call out, because sometimes I've been questioning, like when I'm looking for older cards, like I do set collecting. One of the things I really enjoy, which is kind of weird because not a lot of people are doing set collecting, but I was like looking behind me earlier and I have like I'm starting to get further in the timeline, but I have like WTR, Arc and Crew and Monarch, and I was working on my Tails actually when this announcement came out. I was in the process of it, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I already own some of these basic cards. Now I don't have all the legendaries, because I really, obviously as a Dash player, I cared nada about any of the elemental stuff. So I basically skipped hardcore on that whole set. So I like own maybe one legendary. I think I bought the Ranger head when Outsiders came out, and I paid the top dollar market, which was my dumbass mistake of doing. Either way, I own it, right? So, but why I'm saying that is, TCG player's not always right, and if that's the case, right, it's intriguing because I've seen multiple times where I'm like, why does it say there's this version of the card, but then the Collector Center has like the ultimate data of that? And as these new flashier variants of cards come out, it's so hard to keep up with. I don't even know if I can set collect the 2.0 stuff, because honestly, I'm not gonna be able to get all the marbles, right? Like I already know, like when Dynasty happened, when the Emperor came out, I said to myself, well, I can set collect it, but I'm never going to be able to basically pull the Emperor of my own accord, buying enough product, but I could buy it. But then it's like if I put that much money and park it into the one card, do I really want to do that? I mean, it's at that point I could put that much money into other, smaller common cards and uncommons, or well, there's no uncommons in this game, rares and whatever. So it's an intriguing concept because as 2.0 has kind of evolved, the whole idea of set collecting may or may not actually be able to be done. Like Master Set Madness does a lot of set collecting, but to get a full master set now is like, it's like Pokemon. It became impossible to get everything circa, pre-COVID, right around that era.
Yeah, I think overall set collecting is just hard in any TCG. Really, it's I think it's actually easier in Pokemon, believe it or not, because
okay.
a lot of the cards for a lot of the playable cards, whether they be in reverse holo or just regular holo, incredibly cheap to buy.
Yes.
And then the only ones that are really costly are the full art special versions of them, which is, it's how it should be, right? That's how Flesh and Blood kind of does it too, where a lot of the cards are not super expensive unless it is again, the only thing that really drives up the price of something like that in Flesh and Blood is if the hero is hyped up and is doing really, really well in the classic constructed meta specifically. And that is what drives a lot of that. For instance, like Traverse the Universe, right? Traverse the Universe, all it does is it blocks for 2 and you get to go search for chi. It's only for Mystic Heroes. That's the only thing. It can't be used in anything else, so it's not like a Crown of Providence or a Balance of Justice. It's only able to be used for Mystic Heroes. But the reason it's doing so well right now is because the Mystic Heroes are doing really well.
Really well. And that leads me into Fabled, too. So right now we're set 13. Rosetta would be set 14, technically set 15 if you count History Pack. There's some oddities in there. Multi-language, too. Do you count all the languages as different sets, too? Like, this is where the numeric value when they say set releases has kind of been this weird, kind of homogenous number in my mind as we've gotten a lot further down the road. But looking at these, right, Command and Conquer, that really fancy Marvel from Dynasty, that's $700 because it can be used as a 3-of. It's a generic. But then almost every other one of these is a legendary. So Great Library of Solana, that went way down. Now it's back to $100. I have Ophidia, Arcanite Shard, Heart of Findel. These are all, kind of pre-2.0. Then once you hit 2.0, Plague Hive is now below $100. This, Mystic Gully Inner Chi, which is a Fable, that's only $35 or $40. Blood of Drakai is only $30 or $40. Master Cog's $40. Corsham has come up from the $40. Now it's about $60 because it's becoming meta relevant-ish. So I like that there are some of these, cards that, while they're the rarest thing in the set, right? One in, a couple hundred packs, I forget the exact number, they're still relatively affordable, but there are other blingier, flashier cards you can get. I still don't have a Deathmatch Arena as an example. I don't have the Inner Goalie Cloak. I actually don't even think I have a Master Cog because I never got one with all my bright lights. So I probably need to go buy one of those before Teklevossen shows his true power.
Get it now.
Because I'm just afraid it's going to go from 30 to 90 overnight, and it's like, well, I could have just bought 2, sold 1, and been got it for free. It's weird.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole concept, especially with legendary cards. You have to look at them from that perspective and whether or not they're going to actually be powerful. But I think this is just another example of the rarity of the card does not determine what its monetary value is going to be.
Correct.
It's just strictly about its use. Its use in the game, specifically in the competitive organized play event, is what brings that forward. And I think that as
Sink
long
Below
as that
is a good
continues to be
example.
the case. Yeah, Sink Below. And that card is a necessary card in most decks. And it's a common from a set that was I wouldn't say overprinted, but the unlimited version was overprinted.
Still $1.35 or $1.40 for that card.
And that's fine. That's really, really good. But eventually that it is a card that is necessary anywhere. It has not seen a reprint besides in cold foil. And it is a constant that I think that they're trying to push away from, but unfortunately, unless you just ban the card entirely, you're going to have it in every deck, and so people need.
And I think that's the other reason we haven't seen it. It did come up in a Dromai Uprising deck. I don't know why somebody would pay $9 for the Dromai version of that card. That's interesting.
It's got a little stamp on it.
Oh yeah, I got a little. Oh, so speaking of the stamp, why are people apparently up in arms about these new tree symbol in the middle of the card? That's an old MTG pre-release kind of a thing, but I don't see a problem with it, but I've heard a lot of murmurings that like people don't seem to like that for some reason. What are your thoughts on?
I honestly had no idea that people were upset about that. I think it's, I think that if the only thing it does is it just is thematic towards a certain like hero or a certain type of thing. Maybe there's like right,
Necromancer.
and like you put like a skull stamp on something, and it's
Yes.
like, oh, that might be for a necromancer. I think it's more thematic because like when you take a look at the stamps, they've been doing like little stamps on cards for a while, and even with Dromai, like the symbol doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in that, like, I don't know what that symbol is supposed to represent at all, and it just exists there. There was a time where, because I bought the Dromai Blitz deck in order to upgrade it to then go to my first armory, and when I went there and I played the Sink Below in the in the armory, they were just like, wait a minute, is that a real Sink Below? And I'm like, yeah, of course it's a real Sink Below. Why would I play with fake cards? And it turns out that that little stamp was specific towards the Dromai thing. So I'm not sure if that is, if that's just the premium concept there. Everybody likes their small little easy alternate arts, but I don't know. I feel that's
I thought the
not a big deal
defense
for me.
reaction symbol was actually a very pleasant add. I kind of wish it was there from day one because it does help me as a player recognize that is a defense reaction. I need to think like it's a defense reaction, not that I'm going to accidentally forget that it's a, defense reaction, because it doesn't really differentiate itself from other cards. So, or an attack reaction, right? Like those are also, the reaction cards don't always equate in my head, at least. Sometimes I'm like, what do I do with this? Oh crap, I could have done that. Oh, oops. My bad. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, I guess, like, other than the fact that it quite says, the reaction on the card itself down at the bottom text, but that's like you have to learn to read the card, right? And that's the
reading the
it's
card
like,
explains
exactly,
the card.
exactly. So if you look at it and you're like, that says defense reaction, like, okay, you probably should only play this during the defense reaction step, but now they have access to block cards, and like, I think the one issue I personally have with block cards is the fact that nowhere besides like another player will they tell you to don't put these block cards in your arsenal.
Yep.
Because you
Yep.
can't get them out of there after that point, and so it's
or don't
very,
don't put a chi in your arsenal.
Yeah. Yep. It's
Oops.
really, 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 really bad, and I think that again, a little booklet would certainly help out to do something like that to teach people. But you can't throw every single keyword at a new player. It's going to overwhelm them, and they're not going to feel good about it. But it is what it is.
Well, I'm going to begin to wrap things up, but I wanted to showcase something real quick because I was chatting with this gentleman on X, Twitter sphere thing earlier. I have these, which I don't know if you've ever seen. This is the PvE engine by Teclocrow. These are his decks. And I've been researching. There's a couple different. There's the Overlord engine. There's this. And I wanted to kind of end with PvE. I know that that's the mythical beast, right? It'll come out in 2025, supposedly, or after, if it doesn't get pushed. But there's the relationship to the UPF and PvE. I always kind of thought were like basically, apples and oranges. You're not necessarily separate. Maybe that's the wrong word, but they were intertwined. Their destinies were tied together in some regard. What's your hope for when PvE comes out? Like, hypothetically, now that we know they're at Gen Con, what if in the world this year's first strike decks, next year is PvE at Gen Con? Like, how epic will that adventure be? Will it be like what they did at Worlds, possibly? If they could do something like that, would they have a grand display or something? Like, what could you see? How could that maybe grow the game? Or what's your thoughts on just PvE in general?
I am always an advocate for having a alternate playstyle such as PvE, especially in a very competitive focused PvP game. But I don't know whether or not it is going to be something that is pushed a lot by LSS. I believe that obviously they have high hopes, and I'm really hopeful that in that situation they really want to make it more so about really diving deep and getting the actual data down, making sure that they get a good game out for other people. And I'm really, really happy that they're taking the time to do that. Do I think PvE is going to make this entire game blow up and we're going to see the casual space just absolutely like fly into the sky and everybody's going to transcend collectively.
Yes, yes.
No, I don't think it will. But I certainly hope that it's at least well fleshed out and it does super good. But overall, as far as like PvE goes, I know it's not their main focus, and I also realize that as a company, they have to figure out how they're going to sell PvE. And currently, they can't even sell UPF, let alone PvE. And I think that is their that is where their issue is. It's either their collective relationships with LGSs around the world on what they should or should not be, using, I guess, or like, having a different armory day or anything of that sort.
Sure.
But,
well, and LGSs are stockpiled right now with time. Like, the problem I'm discovering is in Indianapolis, we're blessed to have so many stores. We have a lot of LGSs. I believe in Denver World, I believe there's a lot of LGSs there too, because when I went out there, I looked at the map and it looked like at least probably over 10. But here in Indianapolis, I know we have like over 20. The problem is everyone kind of specializes in obviously the big three, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, and then you have specialties within that. Now you have people that are doing Sorcery and Grand Archive and Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited. Holy moly, there's only so many days in a week, right? And these stores are picking the ones that are selling through the product, because obviously that's a good business choice. I'm not faulting them at all. And we have a couple stores that are dedicated to still doing Flesh and Blood on certain days, but that number is getting further down for whatever reason. Whether it's I'm technically I will take my blame that I'm not going to those events near as much, but I also can't wear 70,000 hats, because if I'm trying to make content and I want to do other stuff, I literally can't go and sit down and play a 5-hour armory event when I need to go do other things or read the research or watch a video or understand what's going on, that kind of thing. But I need to balance that, and that's one of the hardest parts. So I hope PvE draws in the D&D crowd, because I've been doing a lot of D&D, and I know that's a kind of a side tangent for this whole thing, but on Mondays I have a D&D session that I do, and I've been now doing it for over a year, and I'm finding it exhilarating that there's so many parallels that I've started to draw. And going back to this Techlocrow thing, right? If Flesh and Blood is going to release their own PvE, now instead of being first to the market and having the initial, hey, I have this as what I'm providing, there's kind of a weird preconceived notion of, now I'm competing against what's out there. The Overlord engine, the Techlocrow one. There's about 3 others that apparently I've now discovered. Magic of Flesh and Blood has done one. I think Nearly Sane Saint has another one that's out there. There's Fab Adventures, and there's another one that I think is defunct as of this point. Regardless, there's about 6 different or 7 different variations of a PvE style encounter with the Flesh and Blood world. Other games like World of Warcraft did their own version of it back in the day with I think it was called the Raid Decks or whatever, that was something in theirs. And then obviously Lorcana here recently beat everyone to the punch, and they released this whole PvE solo or whatever environment. And I have consumed so many PvE things now that I don't even know what to expect from Flesh and Blood. My expectation can no longer be put into verbalization, because I think I don't say it's too late. It's never too late to release a product. I'm going to buy it regardless. I know that sounds, shilly, but I'm going to enjoy it because I enjoy PvE. I enjoy those experiences. Will it be what I hope it is? Will I have my probably minor complaints and gripes? Probably. But I think that if they got to find the market for it too. They got to find the people that'll play. And I think D&D market might be where they're going to have to go with it. Yeah.
There's definitely a world in which a lot of casual players who are part of that, they want that adventure in a TCG. That's how I design it is much like how Techlocrow designs theirs, where it's more like a dungeon crawl or like a very story thematic kind of concept. And I like that, a system where you can level up your hero and get cards into your deck so you become stronger as you go through the game, and get pieces of equipment and so on and so forth. And I think that's really, really awesome. And in a perfect world, I would love to see that. But like I said, LSS, they'd have to sell the product, right? Where we, as the player base, can make something and just go, hey, try this. Hey, try this. Hey, try
Sure.
this. Hey, try this. And there's no there's no company backing to it. It's just like, hey, I'm trying a thing and I want you to try too. And if you like it, let me know. And, maybe we can push this forward to be something that I can make content on, right? But
Gotcha. Yeah.
as of this very moment, LSS, I mean, it's as a company and as a growing company, they are seeing growth, significant growth in their competitive
That's good
scene.
too. Yeah.
And I think that's really, really awesome to see that as a game that really strictly focuses hard on their competitive style. Does that mean that there is no casual form or no casual scene? Of course not. There is a casual scene. There's several Discords for casual scenes. You and I are casual players, and so it's obviously there. And the thing is what could they possibly make to drive players to go to their LGS and have that LGS run an event to then have you go play in this 2-hour adventure where you and 3 other players get up in a pod and you go through, fight the demons of the demonastery. You know what I mean? You'd have to be very specific in how you make it. You don't want to make it too campy. You want to make sure that it's interactive and it still holds to the core tenets of like how the Flesh and Blood game works. You don't want to like break the game in PvE and then have nobody know how to play it in PvP. It's there's a lot to it as a company to make something like that, and that's why I believe it's been pushed back constantly year after year. Because
the silver lining is you only get one first impression, and I'm glad that they didn't release something that was just thrown together in a dartboard scenario where it's like, I want this and that and that. They're putting time into it, so I think we'll be impressed when we see it. At least that's my gut feeling. And I really, there are a lot of games that are out there, looking at like Lorcana as an example. They did release it early on, but I noticed that the gameplay fitting within their ecosystem, they did something different, which I think Flesh and Blood's going to have to do. They're going to have to release a different card back that is, these cards with this back are not legal in standard CC or Blitz, because the way they did this is they have a whole, I think it's a gold back similar to that color on this oversized person, the battle boss, and those cards have the same core tenets of the game, but they're designed with its own ecosystem that's not within you use this within your competitive deck and it's going to break open the meta or destroy something, because I feel like that's the only way to have a big bad boss, because really a one-on-one match, right, if everything's designed to be even on par, to go 4 versus 1, you basically have to have the cards over here be on par with a percentile multiplier that is not 4 times, because that would just 1k KO people, but it has to be some 1 point something x or 2x power level, so that over the course of 10 turns or 5 turns you have a fighting chance, but you also have a dice roll 50-50 40-30 whatever chance of losing, because you can't just have it easy roll, but you can't have it auto win, or maybe you do. I don't know, there's so many variables, like I just can't compute half of it.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can possibly do, obviously, with it being, if it's like a boss rush situation. Something that I've even thought about is like, they came out with heavy hitters with the deathmatch arena, and like how cool would it be to just get you and 3 other gladiators to go fight monsters in the deathmatch arena, and like have that be like a boss rush fun thing to do. And I like that concept, but I think as far as like making cards different, I think Flesh and Blood is probably not going to change a backing. I think if anything, what they're going to do is they're just going to determine that like they're going to make these cards on a ban list and just be like, hey, these cards are not used for play in this format or these formats strictly because that is the case. Because when you look at a card like United We Stand, which is probably the most PvE card I think I've ever known to date, it blows my mind.
At that card, by the way, I found a
Yeah.
foil copy of it when I was going through some stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have
It's
a
so
full
cool.
copy of this card.
It's so
like,
cool.
Also, so a weird call out while you're doing that. Go ahead. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just saying, like United We Stand is a card that quite literally mentions a party of heroes, and you don't have a party. Like a party system has not been introduced in Flesh and Blood. Dusk Till Dawn is a fairly recent set, but it along with like Everfest and so many other places contained cards that go, oh wow, this would kind of be cool for a PvE thing, and we have yet to see it, right? So
there's a specific thing on the Mist Cloak goalie. The wording is very weird to me. So here, I'm going to read this. It says so. It's a legendary. It is a fabled, but it's a legendary landmark, and it says at the beginning of each of in phase, destroy this unless you've pitched, played, or defended with the blue card this turn. If you've pitched, played, or defended with a blue card this turn, oh, that's not the one. One of these. There. Oh, can I find landmarks? One of the landmarks had a really weird wording that I was like, that's a very odd way.
I wonder if you're thinking of either Corsham or the Deathmatch
It is Corsham. When you arrive, there it is. When you arrive at this location, how do you arrive at a location? We haven't had transportation or travel, which back in the old Star Wars Decipher game, or now technically in Disney Lorcana, they introduced sideways cards, which were like locations, right? So you could go between or battle at this location or whatever. That's adding another layer, right? You're making the three-dimensional chessboard more complicated. But the arrival at a location, the party mechanic, I feel like they're building it slowly into the system, and if you look close enough, you'll find the basis of what they're going to start doing with the game. But we just don't know. We still don't have
it's all speculation essentially to this point. And don't get me wrong, I think that concept is really good, but I also think that if that were the case, it would be an incredibly poor decision for LSS to make quite literally one of the most rare cards in a set be for a location for PvE that has no use anywhere else. And I think that shouldn't. I like, as much as I like the concept of like a plane chase situation where like you're playing in a pod of 4 in UPF and you have a deck in the center that contains all the landmark fables, and you just flip one over and you're like, okay, we're in this one until a player dies, and then if a player dies, I flip we flip over to the next place and we go there.
Sure.
And I think it's cool, but the overall, like, if you're going to do that and you're going to make the most rare card in a set be that, you're really, I feel like it's not, again, like PvE is going to be more for like the people who probably don't want to throw a lot of money into the game and want to throw like $30 maybe every other month or $60 every other month. And
I hope it's more of an LCG style, because somebody gave me a bunch of Arkham stuff, so thank you. I get to experience that. It's an LCG game, but there's some interesting correlations that I could see between having like a monthly cycle or a semi-annual cycle of, here is Battle Box number chapter 1 from Techlocro. Here's Battle Box number 2 from Techlocro. And you go down and you complete these, and as you dive deeper into the dungeon, you maybe get to do whatever the word would be, is develop your character further, start off stronger. Flesh and Blood is kind of the, maybe it's the invert, right? You start at your strongest. You're the only game that starts at your strongest and you get to your weakest. Maybe PvE is you start at your weakest and get to your strongest to battle. Maybe it's the inverse, and that'll be the catch to it. That's like an armory pack or build. I don't know. I mean, there's so many people have thrown around so many ideas. I couldn't tell you where half of them came from. So,
yeah, that's why I personally believe overall, especially with how much the community cares about PvE, you can tell there's just people who just genuinely care about PvE. They want it to happen. They wanted more than anything to happen. And in most cases with TCGs, the power of the community is something that even like when Clash was brought up to James White during an interview with Flukenbox, he was like, give your opinions on fan-made formats and how you feel about them. And James just said, I'm just happy that you guys can utilize these cards however you wish and play however you want and really bring your own creative freedoms into it. And that's why I personally believe that the community at large should be the ones in charge of creating a well-known PvE format for people to play, and Flesh and Blood can continue just focusing on making their own card game instead of trying to directly appeal to the PvE group. Because if you take their numbers from things like their social play kit nights or their commoner nights or UPF nights, most of the time they don't fire. Nobody's doing them really, because it is not the main focus of the people who get into Flesh and Blood, which is they want to get their cards, they want to go to their LGS, they want to win armories, they want to win pro quests and RTNs, and they want to get qualified to go to these big events and play in callings and battle hardens and so on and so forth, and that is their jam. This calls very, very deeply to competitive players, and the casual scene needs to grow on its own, much like Commander did with Magic the Gathering. I mean, it was a fan-made thing. It started as fan-made. People were just doing things on their own, and then eventually it grew to the point where Magic went, "Hey, we can make money off this too," and then they did it. And so, if it ends up being that Teclocro creates such a fantastic format to the point where people are like, "Yeah, I play." We all do a Teclocro night at our LGS every single Thursday, and it's super awesome. And that continues to grow from LGS to LGS. You hear more people talking about it, and it gets brought up more and more to people like James White or Brian Gottlieb. Then eventually it could just be, "Hey, Teclocro, you want to work with us on making a PvE, and it'll be exactly like yours, and we can collab together on that." And if it ends up becoming that, then perfect. Then we have the community to thank for coming together to create something that people enjoy. But I believe that LSS, it's not their direct function, or their, it's not even their place to really just be like, we have to make a PvE format because other LGS or other TCGs did it. It's more so they have the opportunity to do it because this is a very class-focused game. You play around a lot with it, and people do look at it from like a Dungeons and Dragons perspective and see it from there. So I think it's community focused. I would like it to more so be like how Clash is, where it's run by the community and done a lot by the community, and that way it doesn't take away from LSS designing a great game, and more specifically helps the people at LSS determine what people want out of a PvE format without them needing to dedicate so many resources to it.
Makes perfect sense. So, well, I think at this point, let's go ahead and do you have any final thoughts, comments, words for the community at large, or the people that might be watching this and just kind of randomly stumbling into Flesh and Blood? Obviously, Gen Con right around the corner, things like that. Origins I'm going to this weekend, so plenty of opportunity for new players. What's your thoughts? What's the last words of wisdom?
My last words of wisdom are: go to a learn to play event if you have one near you. You can find these events, any event, whether it be an armory or something of the sort, you can find on Flesh and Blood's website through their event locator. So if you are ever curious if there is a place near you that does play, go ahead, check it out. Even if you end up going to an LGS and you're able to learn from it from there, there are several LGSs that I have high hopes do very well in teaching people how to play. There are people there who will teach you how to play. The community is very, very, very welcoming, and will get you to play and have fun. And I've been given tons and tons of bulk to start getting into the game, and I think that is just the way it is. We want people to play the game, but we want you to have fun. So just make sure to play. You don't have to play at the highly competitive level. You don't have to drop thousands of dollars to play Flesh and Blood. You don't have to be a super competitive, sweaty individual to go in and win hundreds of thousands of dollars. If that is your jam, awesome. But you don't have to do any of that. You can play however you wish, whether it be kitchen table all the way up to the World Championship. Just remember to have fun. That's really it.
Awesome. I guess I'll echo some of that and just say that in general, I mean, some of the fondest memories of Flesh and Blood have been the random just playing around or opening packs at the table with my buddies. So that's just been, an exciting aspect for myself. And that if you are looking at this community, there's a lot of very friendly folk, and everyone's willing to teach you. And I'm sure somebody has a bunch of cards they'll just hand you, especially if you're at an event. It's a brand new release. You're like, hey, you're a new player. Here you go. Take everything that I don't want. Here you go. And just have fun. So there's plenty of that. And yeah. So I guess I'll go ahead and sign us out. So until next time, may your games be fun and your friendships grow. Cheers, and see you on the next one.